Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 20 of the Vuelta, España. Now, if you watched stage 19, we were all disappointed and crying on the couch because nothing much happened unless you trek Segafredo, who put on a dominating display in yesterday's stage 19 and won with Mads Pedersen. Now, everyone's legs should be rested for this stage 20, and guys, there's no reason to watch the Butterfly Effect because you basically got to watch the whole 181 kilometers on today's stage, about 115 miles in length, with 5 categorized climbs. And I'm sorry if you don't have the time, you got to get on the trainer. You got to do about a 6-hour training ride today so you can watch the whole race because it was exciting all the way from start to finish. Now, Movistar were on the trainer before the race and even started, and when we hit kilometer 0, it's going to be Robert Stenner going up the road. He had company with one rider from Euskaltel-Euskadi, but he got dropped, and Robert Stenner's going on his own. Now, that'll get brought back, and then we'll start seeing some more attacks. 7 guys going up the road for 2 with Albacin de Koenig in there, and Robert Stenner again is in this move. Now, they're getting some time on the peloton, about 3 minutes as we start seeing the peloton going curb to curb. I'm sitting on the couch almost ready to start crying again here because this is the last mountain stage of the Vuelta España for 2022. Now, it isn't going to take that much longer, though, before almost the tears started here, and then Movistar started throwing in some attacks. Now, the attacks start going, and there's riders all over the place split up, and they're brought back all together with the exception of that front group with the de Koenig Quick-Step riders up there who are putting on a display because they had a massive gap. But with about 150 kilometers still to go as the road starts going up, it's Soler throwing in some attacks. And when we see Soler from UAE team members throwing in some attacks with Richard Carapaz trying to get up the road, out the back is coming Carlos Rodriguez from Team Ineos. Now remember, he had that spectacular crash a couple stages back, and so he's got to be hurting. He got through yesterday's stage, and he finished the stage that he crashed, of course. Didn't lose much time, but he's going to lose big time on today's stage with 150 kilometers to go if he can't get himself back. Now, Team Ineos have set out a fantastic plan here on stage 20, the last mountain stage of the Vuelta España, and he's got teammates wrapped around Carlos Rodriguez trying to salvage their 5th place on the general classification. Up the road, Richard Carapaz is throwing in attacks all over the place trying to get away, and now we got riders split all over this first mountain summit. We come up to the KOM, and it's going to be Robert Stenner getting maximum points for Albacin de Koenig, and now that's starting to put a threat on Richard Carapaz, who's in his own group back there chasing somewhere. Soler stuck in between the middle as he's still trying to get up to that front group of 5, 6, 7 riders that it was to begin with, but now down to just about 5 when they cross the KOM. Now, when we come over the top, we start seeing back there with Quick Step, they were riding the front going over the top of the KOM, and we saw one last attack as 4 guys are going over the top of the KOM. They're going to try to bridge up to the many different groups that are already up the road. And those 4 guys, though, it's going to be Jan Polach, Sergio Aguita, Guessing, and Vincenzo Nibali. Team Astana, he's doing his last Grand Tour of his career, and this is going to be the last mountain stage for Vincenzo Nibali. Let me remind you, 4-time Grand Tour winner. Won the Vuelta, won the Tour, won the Giro 2 times. These 4 guys will drop down the descent, and this will be the last group to leave the Quick Step train behind as they come over the KOM. Up front, when we start going down the descent, groups 2 and 3 will come back together, and that puts about, let's call it right around 20 riders up there, and still another 5 riders up the road that Soler will bridge up to. Now, Soler get up there, and you'll see him arguing a little bit, trying to get everyone to rotate through. They won't rotate through, so Soler's going to throw in attack, and Robert Stenner from Albacin de Koenig is going with him. Now, with that, you got 2 riders going up the road, and we got 110 kilometers still to go with this attack. We're 70 kilometers into the stage, and here it is, a 2-man break going up the road. Now the other 4 guys that were in that original group with Soler and de Koenig Quick Steps, Robert Stenner, they'll go back and get caught by the other groups behind. Now we got about 20 guys chasing 2 guys, and behind we're going to see what Quickstep was on the front, but then Bora Hansgrohe started getting on the front because they got Jai Hindley 10th on the general classification, and up in that front group of, let's call it about 20 riders, is Louis Menkes from Intermarché, who's 11th on the general classification, but about 1 minute 50 seconds behind Jai Hindley. So Bora Hansgrohe starts sitting on the front because the gap at 5.5 minutes will allow Menkes to jump over Jai Hindley on the general classification. So with Bora Hansgrohe setting tempo on the back, now you know we got a big old race here. We got two guys going up the road. We got a group of 20 chasing them. We got Bora Hansgrohe on the front for the GC classification. Now we get into the next climb, and Soler and Robert Stenner to go over the top of the KOM, with Robert Stenner taking maximum KOM points for the second time on today's stage 20. Now all of a sudden that's putting a threat to Richard Carapaz's time when we're talking about winning the KOM with his points. So we know Richard Carapaz is going to have to do something when we get on the third climb here on stage 20. Now, with that third climb starting, where Richard Carapaz has to throw in an attack, he'll bridge up to those guys and he'll go over the top of the KOM, taking maximum points away from Robert Stenner, and that'll pretty much wrap up his KOM classification jersey here at the Vuelta España. Dropping down the backside of the climb, everything comes back together as we start the fourth categorized climb here at the Vuelta España. Now we're going to see an attack from the front group, and it's going to be from Louis Menkes, Intermarché. He throws in an attack on the penultimate climb. He's got Sergio Higuita with him, and the two riders are starting to ride away from the breakaway companions. Behind, Carapaz doesn't want any of this because he wants to win the stage and the KOM competition. So Carapaz throws in his own attack, and he'll bridge up to those two riders to give us three riders up front with about 15 riders chasing back there because it's shrinking, growing, getting big, getting small. It's blowing up all over the place. I already told you guys, you got to watch from the beginning of the race if you want to know exactly what happened on today's stage, because I can't list it all. It is an exciting stage. Now, with those three riders going up the road, we'll look at the back group. Hessing's doing most of the work from what I can tell, but the cameras are jumping around all over the place with so much action taking place. Behind, when we saw his Movistar start to get on the front on the penultimate climb, they're drilling it. Verona's on the front. He's throwing down 100%. And Carlos Rodriguez, who had found his way back on from the first KOM climb of the stage, managed to stay locked on with all the GC favorites. Now with the acceleration from Verona on the front, all of a sudden we see Carlos Rodriguez coming off the back again, but Ineos' plan one is fully in effect still at this moment because he's got Theo Gegenhardt with him to try to do damage control and keep Carlos Rodriguez in the top 10. I'm sure they're hoping for top 5, but you gotta believe top 10, they're gonna be completely satisfied, and they still have Richard Carapaz up the road. They'll go over the penultimate KOM where Richard Carapaz getting maximum points. But once they start down the backside, guess what? Sergio Higuita won't take any pulls because he rides for Bora Hansgrohe, and they got Jai Hindley in the back. And of course, it's Louis Menkes, like I said, that started all this attacks from the beginning and kept Bora Hansgrohe on the front. Now with Louis Menkes in this front group of three, Sergio Higuita doesn't want anything of it. So while they're coming down the descent, Sergio Higuita's sitting on trying to get a free ride. Richard Carapaz doesn't like it much, and he starts backing off just a little bit on the front. We'll see Menkes on the front, and they'll cross over the sprint line competition. And guess what? Sergio Higuita will take the points away from Menkes, who had been riding on the front all the way up the climb, down the descent. And yes, he had some help from Richard Carapaz, but now Carapaz is backing off a little bit. Behind, going up the penultimate climb with Verona's attack, and with Carlos Rodriguez coming off the back, Verona's now throwing in 100%, and that's going to launch Enric Mas on the penultimate climb. Guys, we still have 40 kilometers to go. The gap is down to 2 minutes, 30 seconds to the front group, and Mas is throwing in an attack. Now we start seeing some of the favorites of the top 10 of the general classification coming out the back, because Almeida is coming out the back, Lopez is coming out the back, Jai Hindley's coming out the back, and he had his team riding all day long on this stage. Up front, we'll see our Ensman made that front selection. Ben O'Connor made it there. Our Ensman's getting on the front, doing a little bit of driving because Remco Evenepoel, he just wants to win this Vuelta España. He's riding wise, really wise man right here, 22 years of age, and he is riding so intelligently. I'm very impressed. He's not going to the front trying to blow it up, doing anything crazy. He wants to win the Vuelta España and not take any risks, because many times he's been isolated throughout today's stage with only one teammate, and at this point in time with 0 teammates. So with Remco Evenepoel not taking any pull, our Ensman's trying to gain some time on the general classification, doing some work, but not enough to keep the pace fast enough. And so we'll see Lopez and Almeida come back on. Jai Hindley will find his way on eventually too. But up front, coming out of the breakaway, we saw Soler, and Soler comes back to this front group. Now, he's got Juan Ayuso, his teammate, and he's got Almeida back onto this group. So Soler's having a talk there. We'll see him looking over to the right side, talking to Ayuso, and he's saying, get on my wheel, man. We're going to light this thing up. So Soler throws in a big tack, but it only lasts for about 500, 700 meters at the most. Then he'll pull off, and Ayuso's trying to get away from the GC favorites back here, which is a big, tall risk at this point in time for UAE Team Emirates rider who's sitting third on the general classification, but he's throwing in a big tack, and it'll get brought back quickly. Now we'll start seeing up front there with another rider coming out of the break from UAE Team Emirates is Jan Polanc. Polanc is back now, and Soler's been dropped, so Jan Polanc is pulling 100% with this GC group of favorites going over the KOM about 1 minute 50 seconds back from the duel up front, plus there's riders in between still of the original break. Now, coming down the descent, UAE Team Emirates is on the front, but Movistar get on there and they start pulling 100%. They had a couple riders in the front with Alejandro Valverde up there and Mühlberger. So they're pulling on the front 100%, trying to bring this group back. And they got Carlos Rodriguez, who's still chasing like crazy back there, trying to get back on. Now, Urana gotten dropped, and he's back in that group too. As they come down the descent, all of a sudden, we see Movistar sit up. They're not happy with doing all the work on the front. And that allowed the second group of the peloton to come back up to this group of GC favorites. And now all of a sudden you have UAE Team Emirates back up there with 2 extra riders. Jan Polanc is back up there and Soler's up there, and they'll start pulling eventually. And Movistar have numbers all wrapped around. They got at least 3 riders, if not 4 riders in this group. And so all of a sudden they start pulling, but that allowed that gap to kind of go back out to the 3 riders up front, Richard Carapaz, Menkes, and Sergio Higuita, who've been sitting on. Now, when we start the final climb, like I said, we went through the sprint point competition where Sergio Higuita stole back some money away from Menkes, who was working on the front down the whole descent. And once we start the final climb with about 16 kilometers to go, this climb's 10 kilometers long, and we're going to see Ineos Richard Carapaz throwing in attack. He throws in attack, and it's not going to take too much longer for Sergio Higuita to bridge up to the Ineos rider Carapaz. Carapaz sees him coming, waves him through. Sergio Higuita doesn't want to take a pull because remember, he just got done bridging across, but he's been sitting on for 10, 15, 20K to begin with. So, of course, Ineos Richard Carapaz is upset. He starts throwing the arms out, as you can see in the picture, and then Sergio Higuita comes through and starts taking a pull. Now their time gap's around 40 seconds to the chasers, about a minute, 5 seconds back to the peloton back there of GC favorites. Everybody's trying to catch these guys, but when we start looking at the original breakaway guys chasing the 3 up front, they're not quite 100% organized. Many times I saw them going wide. Robert Gessing, you could see he wanted to catch these guys, but he's not getting a whole lot of love up here at front. And so every time you see the cameras come back to these guys, you could tell why they can't quite bring back the 3 guys up front. Now, Menkes is doing everything he can to try to bring back these 2, but he's not going to be able to close the gap. So we got 2 riders up front, Sergio Higuita from Bora Hansgrohe, Richard Carapaz, and they're working well together up this final climb. Now, behind, we start seeing some tactics being played, and we start seeing attacks from Lopez on the front after Movistar have been pulling up this climb, along with Soler and Jan Polanc, who did the base of the bottom of this climb full gas. But with the attacks of Lopez, that's starting to bring this gap down quickly. We're about halfway up this final climb, and we see the GC group of favorites. They're going to catch that original breakaway with everybody up there, with the exception of Mader and, of course, with Robert Hessing, who's throwing in one last-ditch effort to try to catch the 2 up front. Now, they can't do much, and then Robert Hessing will get pulled back, and we got everybody back except for Menkes, who's still chasing on his own, and Carapaz up the road with Sergio Higuita. Menkes will eventually get caught once we start seeing the attacks from Lopez back there throwing in multiple attacks, trying to get some gap, but he can't. And every time Lopez gets brought back, Almeida The Portuguese rider for UAE team members, he just goes back to the front and starts setting steady tempo because they're trying to bring back everyone to wrap this up for Ayuso to have a chance at winning the stage 20 here, the last mountain stage of the Vuelta a España. Now, all of a sudden, we look back. The gap is about 9 seconds from the breakaway riders up front. Everybody's brought back except for these two. Richard Carapaz is throwing in everything he can to hold off Almeida back there from UAE team Emirates, who's just setting a hard tempo up this final climb of the Vuelta a España. The gap is narrowing. It's getting very tight. They're about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And then Sergio Guida will throw in an attack with about 700 meters to go before the last KOM of this year's Vuelta a España. Richard Carapaz latches on to the Colombian's wheel and then counters his attack at about 500 meters to go and is going full gas with about a 9-second gap when he starts his attack. He goes over the final KOM with about a 5-second gap on Sergio Guida and about a 20-second gap on the GC favorites. Now they start down the backside. Richard Carapaz is throwing everything in because he's solo and he knows if he wants to get his third stage victory, he can't hesitate with all the GC favorites behind chasing. When we look back at the favorites, who's on the front? It's Almeida pulling full gas. 4.5 kilometers to go. Sergio Guida get wrapped up in this group, so now there's only Richard Carapaz that has a chance of winning from the original breakaway of more than 20 riders here on stage 20 of the Vuelta a España. 3.5 kilometers to come, and it's our Ensman that throws in a massive dig. He gets a gap. Almeida can't do anything about it. He pulls off slowly a little bit to the right, looks back, and he knows, I need some help, guys. Nobody's giving any help. Finally, Sergio Guida will come back up there, and Ayuso will be doing some pulls, trying to bring back our Ensman and Richard Carapaz up the road. At 1 kilometer to go, the gap is only 12 seconds. Our Ensman knows he's got him in his sights if he could just do one more big acceleration, but everybody's tired. It's been 180 kilometers already done on today's stage. There's only 1 kilometer left, and they've gone over 5 mountain passes. Now it's mano a mano with a 12-second gap up here to Carapaz. Carapaz is throwing everything he's got into it. About 500 meters, he looks back. He sees there's still company behind him, and he's accelerating, jumping out of the saddle, sprinting with everything he's got. 300 meters, he'll do another look back. Then he'll accelerate again. And then at 25 meters to go, he knows he's got the victory here for his third stage win at the Vuelta a España for Team Ineos rider Richard Carapaz, who wins this stage. Second on the stage, our Ensman, who did a lot of work throughout today's stage, following a couple tacks, setting some solid tempo. The DSM rider was riding solid on today's stage 20. He'll cross the line just a few seconds behind Richard Carapaz, and then it'll be our Ayuso UAE team members who will cross the line with Jai Hindley and Moss on his reel. Remco Evenepoel will lose a few seconds, but he doesn't care because he's won the Vuelta a España for Belgium. Belgium has not won a Grand Tour since the 70s, so Remco Evenepoel is going to sleep like a legend tonight. His phone's going to be ringing nonstop. What an amazing first Grand Tour victory for Remco Evenepoel here at the Vuelta a España. I know the race isn't over. There's still one more stage, but unless he crashes or something really bad happens, Remco Evenepoel has won a Grand Tour race for Belgium here in 2022, and it has been long overdue for Belgium to win a Grand Tour. Now, Carlos Rodriguez, the only rider to lose GC placings in the top 10, he'll drop 2 spots as he lost time on today's stage, but a magnificent ride. Now, we know at the end of today's stage, when we look back at all the other mountain stages, Remco Evenepoel only really went bad on one mountain stage where Primož Roglič put him in the hurt locker, and then he recovered for the second part of it to set a steady tempo and lost about 58 seconds to Primož Roglič, if I remember correctly. So, when you dissect the whole 3 weeks here for Remco Evenepoel, this was an amazing race, and he has definitely stepped up his form. When we're talking about next year's Tour de France, we got another player, because Remco Evenepoel is clearly on the same form as Tadej Pogačar, Primož Roglič, Jonas Vingegaard, and now you got to throw in the name Remco Evenepoel because everything I've seen from this Vuelta a España shows me that he is on the same level as those 3 riders in front of him, which we got another big player to watch here at the Tour de France for next year's 2023 win. Now, quick step, when we dissect their strategies, they're a little bit weak. They were strong in some areas. Tactically, they did everything they could, and I agree with most of their tactics throughout this year's Vuelta a España. But they're going to need to find at least another one, if not two, really solid climbers this year so that Remco Evenepoel can have a shot at winning the Tour de France on next year's 2023. Now, the only thing I really wanted to see, aside from Remco Evenepoel just emotionally so excited about winning the Vuelta a España, as we see today in his interview when he's crying and in tears, I would have loved to have heard him say, I can't wait for the Tour de France 2023 because I'm going to go win it. I mean, if you'd have said that, that would have made my day, Remco Evenepoel, but you made my 3 weeks, and tomorrow you still got another stage. So once you finish up tomorrow's stage, please, just for the butterfly effect, tell us fans, I'm going to do the Tour de France in 2023 and I'm going to win it. Because let's just go ahead and make the hype right now start right here from stage 21 on tomorrow's stage. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We got a great stage tomorrow. It's always a fantastic sprint finish in Madrid for tomorrow's stage 21. And, of course, all the celebrations and the highlights for Remco Evenepoel to wrap up the first Grand Tour victory in, 3-4 decades, whatever it's been for Belgium. It's been a long time, but it's going to be a big one, so you don't want to miss it. So make sure you tune in, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys for Stage 21 of the Vuelta a España on the Butterfly Effect.